Good afternoon. This is the Board of County Commissioners Board Work Session. It is Monday, July 31st, 2023. It is 4:05 p.m. The session is set to go until 4:30 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. We're at 3000 Pacific Avenue Southeast, room 110. For public virtual attendance, you may follow along on the Thurston County YouTube channel. I'm Carolina Mejia. I'm the chair of the board. To my right is Vice Chair Ty Menser. To my left is Commissioner Gary Edwards. Also in the boardroom, we have County Manager Ramiro Chavez, as well as Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell and Assistant County Manager Rob Gelder. And today we're doing a Superior Court update. And we have Judge Wilson as well as their Court Administrator, Kristen Jensen, joining us. So we'll passing it directly to you.
Thank you very much. Can I confirm that you all can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. Please give me the ear signal or the thumbs up if something goes sideways. I will try to be there in person next time. I appreciate the Zoom option. So I thought it's been a couple months since we've had an update that I would cover 5 topics and then a miscellaneous topic. I appreciate that we should be done by 4:30. I'll do my best to be done before then. I want to cover operations updates as we come out of the pandemic, backlog progress, the work that we're anticipating increasing in certain areas based upon new statutes and some other pressures, the remodel at the courthouse complex, technology, and miscellaneous topics. So I'll start with operations. Hesitate to call us in post-pandemic time, but because I'm not a public health person and because every time we thought that in years past, we were not post-pandemic. But our operations are no longer impacted by public health restrictions connected to COVID. And that has been the situation since late last year. So without social distancing mandates, we do not have any public health restrictions on our operations. That translates to the court being able to hear all types of proceedings in most of our courtrooms. We have one courtroom on the main campus that doesn't allow for jury trials, but we are not pandemic restricted or public health restricted with operations. We do have some other pinch points that impact the number of types of proceedings. We are limited to 4 jury trials at a time because between Chandler Court and the main campus courthouse, we only have 4 jury deliberation rooms. Sometimes we're limited by staffing. We are presently recruiting for bailiffs. If we have most of our jury trials for a particular week are in custody criminal defendants, that puts pressure on corrections for transportation and support of those trials. But we work through all those challenges and have had a lot of successes recently. I will say that since March, when our newest judge who replaced retiring Judge Dixon, Judge Eagler, has been fully trained up, we have had many weeks where we've been able to have all 5 main campus trial judges in trial, 4 in jury trials and 1 in a bench trial. So we are pleased when that's possible. And in terms of numbers for jury trials, this year, about roughly halfway through the year, we have completed 31 jury trials and 180 days in jury trial. Last year, that was about our total annual number. So we are projecting that we will, by the end of the year, be in trial, jury trials, and number of jury trials about twice as what we were in 2022. And of course, that's because of the things that I described before.
Judge Wilson, can I ask a question real quick? With those 31 jury trials, how many of them were criminal and how many of them were civil?
You know, I'll ask Kristen to write that number and get that back to you. I don't have that number at my fingertips. I would wager a guess that between 5 and 10 were civil and probably around 20 to 25 were criminal. The majority of trials that go are criminal, but we can get precise numbers from Kristen. That's a great question. Thank you. So now I thought I'll move on to backlog. In some case types, we've eliminated the backlog and we're addressing cases as they're filing, setting them for trial and setting them on a typical schedule. One key area has been family law trials. family law trials, of course, are only heard by judges, bench trials, so they're not jury trials. So one of the reasons we were able to address the family law backlog successfully, or several reasons. One, whenever we had judges at main campus who were not able to do jury trials, if there wasn't a civil bench trial that was ready to go, we assigned family law overflow cases trials to main campus judges who've been trained in family law. And so we were able to assist with the backlog. In that way, we also secured funding from AOC last year that allowed us to hire some pro tems to assist with settlement conferences and trial support. So happy to say that family law backlog has been addressed. Other areas of backlog, civil and criminal, we're working our way through the cases. We have been confirming and holding many civil trials, or the fact that the trial is very likely to go has resulted in more civil case resolutions. Our numbers of pending civil and criminal cases look consistent with pre-COVID, but it's a little bit of a, you got to look behind the number situation, because in both of those areas, we saw a significant drop in new case filings for civil and criminal starting when the pandemic hit us for the next 2 to 3 years. In both areas, we're anticipating an increase in filing. So as you know, in the criminal area, 2 reasons that our case filings dropped starting in 2020. Different criteria for arrest and charging and booking restrictions. So that impacted number of criminal cases filed. And then in 2021, early in that year, the state Supreme Court announced its Blake decision. So that dropped off filings related to possession, felony drug possession cases. We are seeing the criminal case numbers tick back up. They have increased this year compared to last year, projected out by about 300. So we're thinking criminal cases are going to continue to go up. We know that the jail has, starting tomorrow, removed restrictions on booking. We expect that will put some additional charges, and we also appreciate that the prosecutors continue to work through the backlog of uncharged referrals. So all of those things lead us to believe that the criminal numbers are going to climb back up. They have been climbing the last few years. They are not at historic numbers at this historic levels pre-pandemic at this point, but they continue to go up. In terms of civil, it's a similar picture. They dropped in 2020 and slowly been climbing up. In terms of historically, civil cases filing were around 7,000 to 8,000 each year. Early in the pandemic, the low was less than 3,000, and this year's projected total is back to 5,000. So that's what we're seeing in terms of our backlog processing, anticipating that we are seeing what we're documenting, growth in criminal and civil filings, and we are anticipating that that will continue for the reasons that I just indicated. I will say there's some good news stories as we're, I would say, keeping up the pace with civil and criminal case processing. With the reality of trials, we are seeing more cases, both civil and criminal, resolving as trial approaches because the parties know that trial's coming. Example, last week we had 3 criminal jury trials ready to go with courtrooms and judges. One of them went to the jury today, so it went all the way to deliberation. I think they're still deliberating. The other 2 were pleas and sentencings on the day of trial because the fact that trial was going to happen resulted in compromise. So we're seeing more progress there. You all know that we all, with our criminal justice partners, keep a close eye on the 365 plus day tracking mechanism. That's individuals who are pre-trial, have been held in custody for a year or more. We have been pushing hard to make sure those cases are as ready as possible. For the last 6 to 9 months, the number of individuals on the 365-day list has hovered around 25, up and down a little bit. Last week, we hit 15. So that's a huge achievement, a big drop, and we're continuing to monitor those cases so we don't climb back up. I'll stop right there and see if there's any questions about what I've covered to this point before I shift to another area.
Questions, Commissioner Edwards?
I do have a question, but I don't know if it's coming up or not. I'm just curious about the juvenile jail population and anything moving there about looking for some efficiency issues. That's all. Just, you know, you got a lot of empty space over there.
Well, that's a topic that we have thought about and happy to continue to engage on, have engaged on a lot. I will say that there was a really good op-ed in the Seattle Times yesterday that was written by the current and former juvenile court judge in King County and their juvenile court administrator. And it describes the philosophy of juvenile court and how, working with other partners, we identify the individual needs to support success, but also keep the community safe. It's obviously King County centric because that's who wrote the article, but it has a lot of parallels to how we approach juvenile justice. And sometimes detention is needed, but long-term detention isn't the best solution for the majority of juveniles. And the Superior Court here in Thurston County has developed over the last 10 to 15 years systems that support our juveniles in their success by implementing other programs like the Juvenile Detention Alternative Program, where youth come to the facility during the day for oversight and pro-social engagement, like working in the garden. Good question, Commissioner Edwards. Complex answer. I dodged it a little bit. I acknowledge that. But we're happy to continue to talk about the best use of that facility and making sure that we're using the best resources and the most up-to-date approaches for supporting juvenile success, but also keeping the community safe when we have juvenile offenders.
Thank you.
Anything else on the topics?
Thank you.
Commissioner Munster?
I'm curious about so what you described in terms of a slight uptick in criminal filing would be what I would expect based on handling of the backlog of cases. But I'm trying to parse out the backlog of cases versus the alleged crime explosion that I hear about in the media. And that should be determinable, at least anecdotally, if not formally, based on, as you see these cases come in, you have to review the report or probable cause, and you know when the date of the alleged crime occurred. So are we really seeing filings that the prosecutor tells me he's got, 2,000 cases that he's catching up on? Or are you dealing with a crime explosion on the streets today because of the permissive law enforcement policies of the legislature, or whatever reason, COVID, people's mental health went crazy because of an overzealous state government that kept everybody locked up? Whatever. Is it that crime is exploding on the streets today, or you're catching up with a backlog of filings? Do you have any insight into that?
Well, I think we're doing both, and I don't have precise numbers, but I'm as interested as you are in trying to figure out those precise numbers. And we should also include the prosecutor's office. Commissioner Menzer, I've heard the prosecutors say 2,000 uncharged referrals, probably charge 1,000 of those over time. I don't want to speak for the prosecutor's office. I've heard them adjust that figure, and I don't know if that's the current figure, but I want to hear what they have to say. We see both every day when they come in. We'll see an uncharged or a newly charged case that goes back to 2021 that obviously sat in their stack until now. But we're also seeing many new cases each day that are based upon new arrests, that are based upon allegations that are happening or happened yesterday or last week. Some of the more complex cases take some time to investigate before there's charges filed. But I wish I could say 75% of the new cases that are filed are current and 25% are backlog. I think it's, if I had to guess, and I would just be guessing, I think it's more like 90 to 95 are new and 5 to 10 are backlog. But prosecutor would be better at looking at that, and I'll ask Kristen to put that on the list so we can get back to you on that.
The last time I talked to the prosecutor about this, which was 2, maybe 3 months ago, he said that there really wasn't a quote-unquote crime explosion in Thurston County, but there were some disturbing numbers in King and Pierce, and those things tend to come southward. And so he was anticipating that this may be a reality in Thurston County in the near future based on what he was seeing in King and Pierce, but it hadn't really manifested in the way that we hear in the media in Thurston as of that point. So that's why I was asking to see if, you know, there's some follow-up or new trends that would confirm or not confirm that sort of theory that he had.
We'll look into it. I'll see if I can get some clarity on that.
Thank you.
There's a few, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Well, I was going to shift to a couple of other areas where we're seeing growth either in numbers or complexity. Some of it is attributable to legislative changes. So we've had an increase in minor guardianship cases, used to be non-parental custody cases. But those cases are more complex than they were under the old statutory system. And I don't know why, but we've seen about double what we saw historically for the non-parental custody cases. And then we're seeing an increase in ITA, Involuntary Treatment Act cases, and Unlawful Detainer Act cases, especially ones that ask for trials and sometimes jury trials. So that's a new category or increased category of work that we're watching for our making sure our ability to respond and address those cases timely.
Judge Wilson, I was gonna ask in regards to kind of on the other side of what Commissioner Menzer asked, on the civil side of things, with state cases, and have we seen an uptick in filing of any state cases coming through the courts? Has it gone down? What's the trend?
So we saw a dip in 2020 and 2021. We're going up a little bit. I don't think that we're at historic numbers pre-COVID, and I can't tell you why. But I think the trend is upward. I just don't know the angle of the upward trend curve. Does that make sense?
So we might actually be getting reimbursed for what we're actually doing. But, okay, thank you.
Sure. So I'll shift now to the remodel. We appreciate the commission's support in moving us forward for the remodel. We had an excellent series of meetings with the architect team 2 weeks ago, showed them the facility, all angles of the facility. They were here part of one day when court was operating, 2 jury trials were underway. So we encouraged them to see what was happening there. Our focus for the remodel is security, wherever we can enhance security, accessibility for all, and functional operations, and particularly, making sure that we don't create a new backlog or a different kind of backlog if we have to reduce our operations during that active remodel. Obviously concerned about noise and other construction impacts, but be working creatively to address that. And of course, remodel on the whole area here, the whole complex, can impact operations even before building 2 is worked on. We know this fall we'll lose the use of 152 in building 1 for jury orientation, and we're working with county facilities. We talked with Romero about this last week, about how what are some options for replacing that orientation use. If we have no options, we would orient main campus jurors here in courtroom 102, but then that would slow down our jury trial pace. And I don't want to slow our jury trial pace if we can avoid that, so that we can keep moving our cases along. So that's it on the remodel, unless you all have any questions there.
No questions.
So technology, obviously everybody, including the courts, have put new technology in over the last 3 years, a lot of it driven by the pandemic, some of it just driven by the function of the courts. You know, when we have people in the courtroom, they all have to be able to see and hear everything. And we have to have a record. So we've had upgrades that have related to the record recording system. And then our AV needs, we've had over the last couple of years, we've received funds, federal, state, and local funds. We are finishing up using the state funds that we got from the state biennium for AV upgrades. All of our courtrooms are getting better microphones so everybody can be heard. The courtrooms that didn't have the AV support that allows remote participation, courtrooms 201 and 204 are getting those upgrades. And then we have some devices that we're putting into the jury break rooms, deliberation rooms in main campus so that jurors can look at and listen to digital evidence more easily when they're deliberating. So all of those things are exciting. And then of course, sometimes technology doesn't work the way we hope it will. And so sometimes it leads to interruptions of our operations, and we're working through those things and trying to minimize that. But technology is always a hot topic that we are paying close attention to. Any questions on technology?
Questions?
You know, sometimes people ask if we're going to retain using remote participation, and we do allow remote attendance for a number of kinds of proceedings, not every single one, but many of our criminal calendars, short of trial, and many of our civil trials. And we hear from court users that it's really helpful, it saves time and money. And we hear from some court users that it also promotes access. And so if you imagine pre-pandemic, you have an individual who's pending a criminal trial and they have a long ride to get here to show up in person and a long wait. So they're going to have trouble getting here, might have a warrant issue if they don't make it here, and they might lose a half day of work if they don't get here. So allowing that kind of individual to participate using Zoom, you know, shrinks their court appearance time to 15 minutes to 30 minutes and supports access. So our current plan is to support and continue to allow for that to the extent it enhances access to the courts. So last topic is kind of miscellaneous, and that is that, you know, I think I've reported to you over the last year that, like many county agencies, departments, that we've struggled with staffing. We did enjoy a 3 to 4 month period where we weren't recruiting for any positions, and now we're recruiting for a couple positions. Folks who have moved to, you know, more opportunities elsewhere. So we're recruiting for a jury administrator position, as well as bailiffs and on-call security. So if you know anybody interested in those positions, send them to Kristen. We continue to work hard to support our staff so that we can be successful in our operations and meet our mission, which of course is to timely provide fair access to justice at the Superior Court. We've done some training this summer internally. We did some training on gender neutral language and gender affirming language and how to engage with people in a compassionate, respectful way using gender affirming language. That was an outstanding training led by Judge Murphy. And then we have engaged in some training. Kristen and I attended training in June on procedural justice, which inspired us to identify some plans for supporting our entire team on communications that acknowledge that a user of the court needs to be supported and respected and understand what's going on from the moment they walk in the courthouse. So developing that or reinforcing that culture so people understand what the process is, what's going to happen, and feel heard. Lots of studies show that even when folks don't get the result that they asked for, if they understood what happened and they were helped to get to the right courtroom and the judge told them what was going to happen and how much time they were going to have, that enhances their confidence in the system. And so we're working on those things and have been putting a special focus on that this summer. That wraps it up. Sorry that I used up almost all the time. I'm open for questions.
Commissioner Edwards?
How we doing? Winter's coming, dark hours. How we doing on safety with parking and such for your folks?
Well, I think I heard last week, but I can't remember if I've seen an email that went out that said that the parking plan that was developed with facilities in the lead and with the agency or with the departments over here was going to be finalized and implemented, including juror parking close to the building. Maybe Romero has an update that I don't.
Yeah, that is correct. An email should be going out this week, and we're gonna be implementing the parking plan as soon as feasible.
And we're really grateful for that. And you're right to think it's August. It's July 31st, so tomorrow's August, but the days are getting shorter and the times that we worry most about public and staff and jurors, moving to and from the building from longer distances with worries about their security are obviously the winter months.
Is is the homeless camp moved out over there or they're working on it?
It will be by Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Wednesday, okay.
It will be clear by Wednesday, and then we'll put some fences and barriers.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. No?
Okay, it is 4:31. Thank you, Judge Wilson. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Right on time.